Community, so good to see you again. Pastor Brad with another daily Bible reading. Of course, as always, if you want these sent right to your inbox every single morning, findcommunity.com/Bible reading. Super simple, super easy. And today our reading is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, verses 22 through 32. And this is what it says. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost!" they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. And Peter got out of the boat, walked on water, and came towards Jesus. When he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Oh man, we've just started a new weekend series, this past weekend teaching series called Here to There, where we're going to use the Psalms to look at things that we as people, that we all deal with. And one of those things that we all deal with, one of those things that we all have is fear. Right? Like we've all have that moment we can look back and go, oh man, that was a moment where I was afraid. We all got it. Now, what I'm deeply afraid of might be drastically different from what makes you afraid. Like I'm afraid of maybe the San Francisco Giants winning another World Series, right? Go Dodgers. No, just kidding. That's not a real fear. But what I'm afraid of might be drastically different from what you are really afraid of. But that dread, that same feeling that kind of just stops us in our tracks, that moment where we know fear has washed over us, like that's all the same for everybody. And I mean, fear can just stop us no matter what the thing that we're afraid of is. And this particular passage that we read today is kind of crazy for so many reasons. I'm sure a lot of you have heard really good devotionals, messages, Bible studies, etc. on this particular story. And a lot of times when we come to this passage, we rightly focus on Jesus walking on the water, Peter getting out of the boat to walk on water, and then him turning away from Jesus. And as Peter's sinking, Jesus grabs him. And we're like, oh my gosh, Jesus climbs back in the boat. And that's all really important stuff. Like we focus on some of those miracle aspects and how cool that is and how important those are. But I think what I want to do today is point out something that might be just a little more subtle, maybe something that's just underneath the text a little bit. That as the disciples are on the lake, Jesus intentionally chooses to walk on water past the boat. And what happens when the disciples see Jesus? Like fear overtakes them. It's a ghost. Look at this thing out there. It's a ghost. And then what Jesus responds to them, he says, "Take courage. Take courage. It is me." So then as Peter steps out of the boat, walking on water, by the way, how cool is that? Fear grips him when he starts to see the waves and the wind come. And he begins to sink. Right? Here's another moment where somebody got afraid. And so then Jesus reaches out and he catches him. And then he has that famous line, "Why did you doubt? Why did you doubt?" And so I think what's subtle underneath the text is that what if Jesus in this moment was doing something only Jesus is capable of doing? Which I would say is simultaneously saying to the disciples, I see and notice that you have fear. But remember, I am greater than your fear. I understand you have fear. There's things that you're afraid of, whether it's be a ghost or if you're out here on the water with me, that all of a sudden the winds and the waves are coming. But I think Jesus' actions show to the disciples, look, you might have fear, but I am greater than your fear. I don't know when the last time you heard that, but let me say it just to you. Jesus is greater than your fear. Let that sink in for a moment. As powerful as fear is in our lives, Jesus is greater than your fear. Now, that doesn't mean that you'll never have a moment where you've got to deal with fear. That doesn't mean there's not going to be a moment where you're afraid and you feel that dread sweeping over you, or all of a sudden your heart stops because, oh my gosh, this is a fearful moment. It doesn't mean none of that will ever exist. But we can face those moments because we understand and we know that Jesus is greater than our fear. How cool is that? Jesus is greater than our fear. How will that statement change how you live today? How will that statement seep into the way you see the world itself? Yes, fear exists in so many different ways in our lives, and all the things in which fear manifests itself in my life might be totally different from the way it comes out in your life. But just as true as the statement that we will have to face fear in our lives, just as true as that is, it's just as true that Jesus is greater than our fear. I pray that you live like that today. I pray that there are things that you say that are different because you understand and know and live out that Jesus is greater than your fear. I pray that that shapes the way in which you interact with people. I pray that that shapes the way in which you serve and love people and enter into your relationship with Jesus today. Whatever fear you're facing in your life, I understand it's very real and it exists. And yet Jesus is greater than your fear. Let's live like it today. Let's do this, guys. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope to see you soon. Love you all. Take care.